9 Spoons, a Chanukah story by Marcy Stillerman. The entire family had enjoyed Oma's famous latkes down to the last delicious crumb, and the children were finished playing the dreidel game. The last night of Chanukah was drawing to a close. The flames in the big silver menorah were flickering out, but the light in the strange, twisted little structure nearby still shone brightly. Sarah, the youngest grandchild, climbed onto Oma's lap. "Tell us the story of the children's menorah, Oma," she said. "Yes, yes, tell us the story," the other children begged, as they gathered in a circle at Oma's feet. Although the adults were ready to leave and were holding the children's coats, they sat down to wait until the story was told. "It was the winter before the war ended," Oma began. "A cold, dreary time. Early one morning, Leah crawled into my bunk and poked me until I woke up. 'Minna, Minna,' she called out. 'Shh,' I said. The shrill shouting that woke us each day had not yet begun, and the other exhausted women were still asleep. 'It's snowing, Minna,' Leah whispered. 'Come and see how beautiful it looks outside.' There were 7 children in our barracks, but I felt closest to Leah," said Oma. "Maybe because she was the youngest, only 4 years old. In spite of the cold, I crawled out of my bunk and walked with the excited little girl to the one doorway in our barracks. Sure enough, heavy white flakes were falling from the dusky sky. Snow covered the bare ground around the bunker, and little white mounds filled the links of the electric fence that surrounded the camp. The guard tower looked like a misty giant," Aaron said, remembering the story from last year. "Yes," Oma said, "but its mean searchlight was dimmed by the snow." "It is beautiful," I told Leah. "Now you must come back to bed. It's still night." I took her into my bunk, and she snuggled between Razel, my bunkmate, and me. Leah soon fell asleep, but we had awakened Razel. "It's the first snow of winter," I told her. Razel nodded. "It's Kislev already. Soon it will be Chanukah." Even without a calendar, Razel always knew what the date was and remembered exactly when the Jewish holidays fell. "The children should have a menorah," Razel said. "But how?" I asked. "I could make one," Razel said, after a few moments' thought. "I could make one out of spoons." Razel had been an artist before the war. She was so good with her hands. In the camp she worked in the sewing room, repairing the uniforms of the Nazi guards. Sometimes she smuggled out a needle and enough thread to stitch together the rags we wore. If anyone could figure out a way to make a menorah, surely Razel could do it. Benny, Oma's 10-year-old grandson, spoke up. "Razel said she would need 9 spoons, right?" "That's right, Benny," Oma said. And in the camp, spoons were valued like gold. When we first came, everyone received a metal bowl to hold the watery soup and scraps of food they gave us. But getting a spoon was our own problem. Whoever had one was able to scoop up every last drop of food. So how could we possibly gather 9 precious spoons to make a menorah? "Did you have a spoon, Oma?" asked Sarah. She knew the answer, but liked to ask that question whenever her grandmother told the story. "Yes, I did. I took it with me wherever I went, and even slept with it at night." Oma closed her eyes, remembering. "Then you had a great idea," Aaron said proudly. Oma continued in a soft, shaky voice. I said, "Razel, if you share your spoon with me at mealtime, I'll give you my spoon for the menorah." "Of course I'll share," said Razel. "Now we already have 1 spoon." Just then we heard someone tap on the bottom of our bunk. Miriam had heard us talking. "Hindle and I will share a spoon," she whispered. Oma held up 2 fingers. Now we had 2 spoons. "But you still needed 7 more spoons for the menorah," Aaron said. "We did," Oma agreed. That morning, walking through the slush to get to the factory where I worked, I saw a piece of metal glittering in the mud. It was an old bent spoon. A miracle! Since hundreds of women walked that way each day, there was no way to find out which poor soul had dropped it. Now we had 3 spoons. That evening, as we stood in line for some food, Hindle came up behind me and quickly thrust something cold into my hand. It was a beautiful silver teaspoon. "It was in the pocket of a suit," she said quietly. Oma took a deep breath and continued, "You see, Hindle's job was to sort through the mountains of valuable things for the guards, things they had taken away from us as soon as we came to the camp. Jewelry, clothing, combs, even pictures of our families. Hindle could have gotten into terrible trouble for bringing anything to us, but she wanted to help with the menorah. Now we had 4 spoons. That cold night, as we huddled together for warmth, Miriam bent down and pushed 2 pieces of metal into my bunk. I felt them in the darkness. They were rusty, the handles were cracked, but they were spoons. "Where did you get them?" I asked in amazement. Miriam looked around fearfully before she answered, "I found them in the garbage." Miriam worked in the kitchen. If she had been caught taking spoons or anything out of the garbage, she could have been badly punished by the guards. Oma's eyes were bright with tears. Now we had 6 spoons. A few days later, Liba, a woman who had just been sent to our barracks, brought in 2 more spoons, nearly new. We wondered how she found out about the menorah. Did the guards know too? Would they take away our spoons? What would they do to us? "Don't worry," said Liba. "All the women in the camp know about the menorah, but it's still a secret from the guards." Liba told us that she washed the clothes and cleaned the house of one of the guards. For doing this, he offered her some extra food. Even though she, like the rest of us, felt hungry all the time, she told him she wanted spoons instead. Now we had 8 spoons. Sarah held up 8 fingers and said, "You still needed 1 more spoon." "That's right," said Oma. "It was just 2 days before Chanukah, and we still needed 1 more spoon for the menorah." We thought about it all day while we worked. We whispered about it as we ate our watery soup and stale bread. We wondered about it as we lay awake on the hard boards that were our beds. Before I fell asleep that night, I asked Hashem to please send us 1 more spoon for our menorah. Finally, on the last night before Chanukah, a young woman we had never seen before brought us a rough handmade spoon. "It was my sister's," was all she said. Now we had 9 spoons. 9 spoons, little Sarah murmured sleepily. Early the next morning, Razel woke me gently. "Look," she whispered, "there between us in our bunk stood a menorah for the children." Razel had twisted the handles of the 9 spoons into a stem and stuck it into a piece of wood so it would stand. She'd bent the round parts back to hold the flames. The shamish spoon could be picked up to light the others and replaced in the twisted base. The women woke up, anxious to see Razel's handiwork. They crowded around her, amazed and delighted with the little menorah. That night, when it seemed safe, Hindle gathered all the children to the space in front of our bunk. Miriam filled the first spoon and the shamish with fat she had saved from the kitchen. Razel rolled 2 wicks from some cotton thread she had brought from the sewing room. With one of the matches that I got from a worker in the factory, I lit the shamish. We whispered the blessings together, all the women, the children too. They held their breath as I took the shamish and lit the first Chanukah light. Oma smiled. It was our own special Chanukah miracle. For 8 nights we lit the flames in our menorah, and the children had a Chanukah to remember. "I'll remember," Benny said softly. "I'll always remember," said Aaron. Oma hugged sleepy Sarah and carried her over to the Chanukah lights. Spellbound, the other children rose and stood silently around the precious little menorah from long ago. "Look, Oma," Sarah's voice was full of wonder. "The flames in the children's menorah are still burning." Hi everyone, I am Ellen Berman. I hope you enjoyed the story of The 9 Spoons by Marcy Stillerman. This is a story that I discovered last year when I was teaching a class on Chanukah children's literature to grades 5 through 7 for an elective that they had signed up for. I chose it as one of a number of books that I thought would hold their interest based on the fact that they're older students. In terms of the enduring ideas that I would like them to come away with, I was mostly interested in the parallel between the bravery of the women in the camp and the story of the Maccabees. And I also think it's interesting that the story of the 9 spoons focuses on the creation of the menorah and what a miracle that was in the camp relative to the miracle of the oil for the menorah in the temple that was restored by the Maccabees. So I would like to ask questions about, what do you think, how do you think the story of Chanukah and the story of the 9 spoons compares in terms of what are their similarities? Also, one of the things that I'm interested in getting across to kids as they start becoming closer to B'nai Mitzvah and beyond is about Jewish literacy. I mean, part of why the women in the camp were able to do what they did is because they knew their background, they knew their faith. As it mentions in the book, Razel actually was someone who actually paid attention to the calendar, to the Jewish calendar, and she was the one person who knew when it was Kislev and who knew when Hanukkah was going to start, and she was the one who really was the driving force behind the idea that they needed to make Hanukkah for the children and to have a menorah for them. And so one of the things that I think is very important is a lot of times kids don't understand why they're learning something. And I really want them to take away that they're not just learning something to learn it. They're learning about Judaism to take it with them wherever they go. And so one of the big ideas is that having good Jewish literacy allows you to take your faith anywhere in the world and practice it. And one of the things that I mentioned in the write-up is I would like them to answer in terms of an assessment, what would I need to know to be able to celebrate Hanukkah if I were somewhere else in the world where there aren't a lot of Jewish resources? What kind of things would I want to be able to know to be able to do that? To get them thinking about what does it mean to be a Jewish adult and how do you take your Judaism with you? Anyway, that was my take on the 9 spoons. I hope you enjoyed it. I also hope you'll enjoy looking at my annotated bibliography. I had done quite a bit of research on Hanukkah books last year and have supplemented that quite a bit this year. And I really believe that I've assembled a list of really excellent books, and I hope you'll enjoy them. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care.